So I wanted to say thank you to everyone for showing up kind of late in your work day if you're in Italy, or first thing in the morning if you happen to be here in the United States. You should have been seeing quite a few emails that came in last night for us, first thing in the morning for you. I feel like that's how this will work for the next couple of weeks. We're all going to wake up to emails from the other group. I have a bunch I need to go through, so just know that I have seen them and I'll be trying to work through them a bit in the background today. Also a reminder to join Slack if you haven't already. I know one person has reached out to me because they had some issues, so we're going to work to get you on that. The pre-arrival survey has been posted to Slack. So that is our somewhat cruel way of trying to push you over there, because we're not going to send it any other way. So if you are going to do the pre-arrival survey, which you have to go to Slack to get it. Sorry. I also want to remind you that the phase 2 sessions are being recorded. Those will become available to you as soon as I can get them uploaded. I'm in the process of uploading the second one from yesterday right now. Phase 3, however, will not be recorded. And so we just wanted to make that clear. Only the phase 2 sessions are going to be recorded. And then the last thing I wanted to say is I did send out some emails last night talking about mentoring sessions later this week. And again, I know there's a few schedule changes, so you might be hearing from me about moving some things around. You also might see that you only have a session on one day. That's because the pitch workshop session, you're only going to do once in phase 2. So it's either this week or next week. So if you heard from me and you only have 1 hour scheduled for this week, congratulations, you get a day off, but next week you'll have 2. So with all of that being said, our session today is with Dave Mosby. What we're hoping you can kind of get out of this today is how to develop a message that will resonate with investors and how to refine the materials you have. And again, we'll be working with you one-on-one in workshops over the next 2 weeks on doing that as well. But I don't want to go too deep into things. I am going to hand things over to Sebastian to introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you all for participating. Yes, we've been working with Dave now for a while. In fact, Dave Mosby was at the time working very closely on the academy side of Keiretsu Forum, organizing those type of activities that are named like Perfect Pitch and Capital Access. And that's also classes that he provides to a lot of different countries, delegations, a lot also with Asian countries that are coming to the Silicon Valley. So definitely a framework and content that has been proven that we really love to use and reuse. And we invite mainly Dave to explain really this type of this part of our programs, and that here we'll have running with Runway. So that's really the main presentation. I will let Dave explain maybe where he comes from. He did a few exits. He's going to tell you a little also his experience running a public company. I wanted to make sure that you understand what we're trying to achieve. The next section called Perfect Pitch will be about you tackling the framework and getting ready to give us a slide deck that fits the format that will be covered here, and probably that we will end up with maybe sending you an email giving you exactly the framework what we accept for the next Perfect Pitch session next week. And that will be another hour and 15 minutes, so it will be short for 12 companies. So we make sure you all have the time to present, and we give a very small feedback between each presentation. That's it. I just wanted to make sure that you understand the expectation, and I will leave the floor to Dave. Thank you, Dave, as always.
Thank you for inviting me, Sebastian, and Randy. It's a pleasure to meet you. I remember 2008, 2009, when Runway was first getting started, and it reminded me of the days of China Basin in 95, 96, 94, 95, 96, when all of the ISPs for the internet, you could put them in one room. And they all went into this building at China Basin, south of Market. Well, that south of Market community is way different today than it was in 1994. The internet is way different than 1994. So just as a quick backdrop, I've been in information technology related businesses since 1969, 1970, something like that. I've had the incredible blessing of having moved through the technology business. I went to work for the first venture funded software company in Silicon Valley named Boole and Babbage in 1978. You can look that up on Wikipedia and see a little bit about some of the formative stages and how a guy named Pitts Johnson and William Draper worked together to create the venture capital industry in California in the middle 1970s. So I've just been blessed. I've started 5 companies, led a public company through 25x market cap growth in 30 months. And as a consequence of that, I've got lots of scars. And the scars are things that I use to help inform groups like us today on how do you tell your story, not in a theoretical context, but how do you do it in a practical way that answers the key questions that all investors have. And we're going to get into that as we move ahead. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I have, in fact, yep. So I've shared my screen.
You're all good.
The perfect pitch is an architecture for how to tell your story in a way that resonates with investors in a very natural, normal way. And so it's not contrived, but it's all very, very practical. So how do you make it possible to get that second meeting? Many of you are in circumstances where you're out trying to raise money and nobody will talk to you twice. They may talk to you once, or they may listen to you once, but what we as early stage entrepreneurs do is we tend to scare investors off more than we welcome them in. And so today is, how do you switch that paradigm? How do you invite them in a way, or have them go away so you don't waste time with them? So the longer program that I've been doing since with Keiretsu Forum in 2009 is called the Capital Access Series. And that's a several-day program that involves faculty members who are all domain experts and angel investors. And they're there on purpose to equip you to tell your story in a way that investors can hear it, because you usually don't. I didn't, but I still was able to raise $8 million. So what I'm about to share with you has had some proof in the pudding, so to speak. So the next thing that is, there's a big problem in the world, and that big problem is less than 5% of entrepreneurs who get a meeting with an investor, less than 5%. Think about that. Are you part of the 5% or the 95%? Less than 5% get a second meeting. That means they resonate with an investor, and the investor says, and the investor must say this to themselves or somebody else, I want to learn more. If they don't do that, nothing else is going to happen. Now, just to make sure, we may have some language issues here, but if any of you at any point has a question or a comment or a protest, you want to argue something, then let's do that here not later, because that's what benefits all of us together. Nobody, no individual here is as smart as all of us together. But that smartness doesn't come out unless you ask questions. So when I make some kind of crazy scheme or claim, if you don't agree, I want to hear about it, because there's other people who don't agree, and they need to hear about it as well. Does that make sense? Say yes. Okay, so if this big problem exists, entrepreneurs have this drive to say, how can this be? Why is this the problem? Why does this, so why does this big problem exist at all? The problem is we as entrepreneurs fail to really hear. That is, we understand, we hear and understand, and we are even worse at clearly responding to investors' key question. Because we think the question is, how does your product work? What do you sell it for? What's the market size for? But that's not the question. That's not the single unifying question that investors are universally seeking an answer to. So Valentina, what do you think about what you just heard? I'm going to call on you if you don't volunteer with questions.
That sounds good. I think that I experienced several times this approach. I had the chance to talk with, a different stage of our startup with those people, try to sell, our value proposition and approaching, insisting. And my general impression that it depends pretty much the way how you approach, and also who you have in front of you. It happens many times to me that people turn around, just don't, give attention to me at all. Other people give me a lot of attention, but at the end, nothing happened.
So what makes the difference? So why do some people give you lots of attention and others don't?
One point is that depending who introduced you to this person, if you got a connection before, or if you spontaneously approach this person without knowing him. So I think those two scenarios are the starting point. Of course, if someone introduces you, you are much luckier, and you have more options to, to get engaged with this potential investor. In the second option,
Yes. So let me ask you a question about this. So I hope everybody is listening carefully, because what Valentina is speaking to is exactly on point. Because look up here at this word likelihood. So if someone that Valentina trusts introduces me to her, she's going to trust them. She's going to automatically give them a likelihood score that's higher than somebody who is completely new. So this is the investor's key question. It's at the face of it, it's very simple, but it's very complex. What is the likelihood? What is the probability that by investing with Valentina, I'm going to get my capital back? Because most don't. Let me say that again. Most investors investing in early stage businesses like ours do not get their capital back. This is a statistically reliable statement worldwide. I've worked with entrepreneurs and investors in South Korea and Brazil and places in between. Most investors do not get their money back. Why should you, Dennis, or why should you, Joria? Why should you be different? That's what I need to know, because that is the key question here, is why are you different? When Valentina gets introduced by somebody that an investor trusts, That makes her different right there. So don't, what she said was incredibly important. And so that's why you need to understand how to tell your story simply, succinctly, and powerfully. And that's what we're going to do today. So Perfect Pitch equips you as an entrepreneur to answer investors' key questions in terminology that they can understand. They don't care about the chemistry. What they want to do is they want to know what's the likelihood that this is going to achieve explosive growth, which is the only driver for explosive valuation. And that's the only thing that I really care about as an investor. Questions, comments, protests? When an investor believes that there's a sufficient likelihood that I'll get my capital back, I will then say, I want to learn more. I'm ready to take the next step, a second meeting. If you don't get a second meeting, you're never going to get any money. This clear? It's not, am I going to give you money? It's, am I going to have another meeting with you to help to move through this decision-making process? Attention, interest, desire, conviction, close. Those are 5 key steps that you must move through with any investors who are going to actually contribute financial resources to your business, or any other resources for that matter. Again, questions, comments, protests. I want to make sure that this is, yes, Dennis.
Okay, it happens sometimes here in Italy. We face to face with a potential investor, and we talked about this. Okay, they want to know exactly that kind of thing. They want to know which is the multiple of the capital they will get back. But when we try to reply to that kind of question, many times you have your business plan under your hands and you try to make forecasts, and you have, based on that forecasts, a sort of, multiple they will get back their capital. But when you talk about the business plan, poof, everything happened, because they say that it's maybe it is overestimated. We say sometimes that it's underestimated. So if you talk about the business plan to try to get that value, it's difficult to close that discussion.
So there is a wonderful book that speaks to this very issue, Dennis. Yes, I hear your comment. I've been there myself. And what I figured out was that if I go from a leap of, oh, here's my idea, to here's my business plan, even if an investor says, show me your business plan, you have to understand what they're trying to do is they're trying to mitigate this risk, and they're making a leap too far. So what you need to do is to lead them through a progressive learning experience, which is exactly what we're doing next. So what's going on in each of your heads right now is, what's up with this thing that Dave's talking about? How's this going to work? Well, no, how's it going to work for me? How's this going to work for me? Well, let's move on to this next step. And Dennis, you just, you set up the question great. Oop. I can't work my mouse today. Got too many screens. So here's something that's really important. This resonance cascade. Now you think of a cascade like a waterfall, and as that waterfall goes further, it builds up mass and energy. It's just physics. Okay, so I have an opportunity to meet with an investor. So there's some requirements, and those requirements start off with clarity. If I'm not clear about the value that my invention, if my invention doesn't create compelling value for some identifiable customer, I, as an investor, cannot evaluate your business. So unless you're very clear. Now, here's the great temptation. The great temptation is I am a biochemist. And I understand how all the biochemistry works. And I have figured out a way to mitigate the pain of migraine headaches. The easiest thing for me as a biochemist is to get caught up in the chemistry that results in mitigated pain for migraine headaches. But yet, it's not the chemistry that matters. What matters is that people escape the pain of migraine headaches. And it's chemistry that opens the possibility for that outcome. But if I'm not clear about what the benefit is, I cannot create any opportunity for certainty on the part of investors. Well, if I haven't moved them from clarity to certainty, I cannot move them to trust. Is this making sense, Dennis? And sometimes investors will try to pull you too fast through this. And the thing that's important is that you stand your ground and build the case for the business, not for the product. So clarity leads to certainty. Certainty sets a foundation for trust. Trust sets a foundation for resonance. That is, you're on the same page, so to speak. That investor and entrepreneur are in alignment. Is this making sense, Valentina? So far, so good? Only after you've been able to get to this part where you're both on the same page and you have a lockstep set of enthusiasm, can you move from this resonance to investment. If you don't do these 4 steps, 5 steps, you will never get to here unless an investor makes that leap of faith on their own. And that rarely happens. Questions?
Dave, I have a question.
Yes, please.
You told us before that early stage companies, investors that invest in early stage companies basically do not have their money back in nor one case. But
yes.
in this slide, basically it is there is the assumption that all the early stage companies that have been invested by these investors at a certain stage have demonstrated certainty.
Yes.
So how you can balance the 2 aspects?
That is a great question. So I see your company name, but I don't know your name.
Marco Cappellini.
Okay, Marco. So that's all I can possibly remember.
Sure.
So Marco, every one of these things, clarity, certainty, trust, all of these things are scalar. They're not binary. It's important. It's not like I either trust you, Marco, or I don't. It's not quite that. It's not that simple. It's, have you given me evidence to support trust in any of these domains? Have you given me sufficient clarity to demonstrate, oh, I have a high degree of certainty. Because of that high degree of certainty, I have a high level of trust. But just because I have certainty doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to have trust. But if you don't understand these relationships, you will shoot your foot off. Guaranteed. You will say things or do things that undermine an investor's confidence or trust in you. You just need to know that these things, so none of these things are binary. They're all scalar. That's why you get paid so much money. Just kidding.
Thank you.
But these things. So the next thing is, as you say, okay, so how do I tell my story that allows me to progressively reveal the certainty of the investment opportunity? You need to understand that investors have choices with regard to where they put their money. And their investors have an internal requirement, which is that they improve the yield of what they have as resources. What does a farmer have? A farmer has land, and they need to be able to improve the yield of that land. And so they pay attention to where they put which and how much of their seed. So investors have the same problem. They have money. Their money is the only thing that generates yield for them. They don't do work. Their money does the work. And so they have to be very careful about the choices they make. It's not rocket science. Okay, where am I going to get the best yield on my seed corn? Where am I going to get the best yield on my money? And so the only way I need to do that is to understand this thing right here. So this investment opportunity is what you're bringing to the table, not a product. Everybody get that? You're bringing to them an investment opportunity. And however much time you have to speak with an investor, you need to focus 50% of your time on the investment opportunity. Well, whether you're investing in stocks and bonds and other kinds of financial instruments, every one of them presents an investment opportunity. So what do you do when you're trying to evaluate alternative investments in public markets? You go and look at SEC reports or other financial reports. Why? To be able to mitigate your risk. How have they done? What have they accomplished before? Why should I trust that this investment opportunity, whether it's Exxon or it's government bonds? What is the risk of my target return for this investment opportunity? Your business is no different. What is the risk and how are you managing it to get this return? So 50% of your time is going to be, here's the investment opportunity. Here's how we're going to mitigate your risk. Now, this goes back to Dennis's question earlier, which is how do we move progressively through relationship development with an investor? If you find yourself dealing with an investor who is pulling you too rapidly through this process, you're dealing not with an investor, but a gambler. You need to understand that. And the hardest thing I've ever had to do is to walk away from a gambler. Because gamblers will tell me, here's how much money we're going to give you, and it's going to be great, and nobody's going to interfere, and you get to do whatever you want to do, and blah, 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 blah. They're lying through their teeth. If you don't find an investor who is trying to grow their money, you have a gambler who's trying to win at the slot machines. They're not good business partners. Very painful. So investment opportunity, risk mitigation. That's the two major components of your pitch. Whether it's a speech and you meet somebody in the elevator, investment opportunity first, how you're going to mitigate the risk of the return that needs to be here. When you say this investment opportunity, this is where you're going to say, here's what the return is. So what does this look like? The investment opportunity is made up of 4 components. One is, what's your big idea? So Dennis, Marco, Valentina, Paolo, I want to take a break here for a couple of seconds and go through these things and say, okay, you have to have a big idea. There's, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Then I need to know, oh, does this catch my fancy? Does this catch my attention? So Valentina, this was part of it. Part of what you said when you first spoke is that some people give you attention, some don't. The people who give you attention look at and say, oh, you have a big idea that catches my eye, catches my attention. A deal, then you need to be able to quickly reveal the deal. Here's how much money we're raising to get the best return for our investors. I want to know as quickly as possible how much you're raising. Don't be shy. If you're not confident in this, then you're in the wrong business. Once I've revealed the big idea, and then here's how much money our team, our leadership has decided we are going to raise. I'm not asking for it. I'm not begging for it. Here's how much money it's going to take to get the best return for our investors on this big idea. Do you see how those things weave together? Any questions about that? The big idea is the driver, because the big idea is what's going to drive explosive adoption for whatever your product is. Once you've got that clear, then you say, here's how much money we're going to need to get the best return for our investors. Given how much money, let's say I'm going to make something up, $2 million for 20% of my company. That's the deal summary. Use of proceeds. So $2 million, I'm going to spend that $2 million, 40% on sales, 30% on marketing, blah, blah, and then split it out. But that's as detailed as I'm going to get in an early presentation. But the most important part of this whole section is this last line. How are investors going to get paid? If you haven't figured that out before you ask for their money, you're already dead and just don't know it yet. Yes, Marco.
Regarding this, I've been told that this depends a lot on where you are positioned in your cycle. So if you are pre-seed or seed, perhaps it's too early to understand how you will remunerate the investors and when.
So why are you investing in the business in the first place? You, Marco, why are you doing it?
Because I see value in what I do. I see value in what I bring to people. And I think that this can be something that will grow and grow in the future. But I'm not able to say, in 2 years and a half, you will be remunerated in this way.
So this places a burden of thinking on your shoulders, which is, if things play out this way, you need to invent a scenario and say, if things play out this way, here's how my investors are going to benefit. Now, who knows what's going to, did anybody predict a pandemic besides Bill Gates? So the world is going to play out in a way. Yes, Valentina, did you have a question or a comment?
No, not really. Sorry, I was distracted.
Okay. But the key is here, Marco, and everybody else. Dennis, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, about the last part, how and when investors get paid. Is it the case there to talk about the potential exit?
Yes.
Great.
So,
okay.
So I can tell you, of the 5 businesses that I've started, I didn't actually start executing on the business until I had an idea about who potential buyers were.
Okay, great.
Okay.
This is what we are trying to do this now. Okay.
Yeah. So, and
I have a question.
yes, please. This is
Yeah,
great.
what is your idea about the team? Because I know that the investor also invests in the team, not
Yes.
only in the idea.
So is the team part of the investment opportunity, or is the team part of how you mitigate risk? Everybody, think about that. The topic that you want to speak about, is it investment opportunity or is it risk mitigation?
The second
It's
one.
risk mitigation. And it's probably, it turns out that that's the #2 risk of any new business. We're going to talk about those in just about 90 seconds.
Okay.
But that's a great question. Bernald, did you have something? Or anybody else?
Yeah,
So,
I say the second.
I'm sorry?
I say the second, the mitigation risk.
Yes. So we're going to get to the risk mitigations. So the people issue, but there's much more to that. But that was a great question and the timing is perfect. But you have to remember the timing that you're experiencing as you hear this. This is the same thing that's going on in the heads of investors. What is the likelihood that by investing with Marco or Erica, what's the likelihood that I'm going to get my money back at all? Much less can I get it back at a multiple that's okay with me. Because when you start being able to demonstrate a high likelihood, my enthusiasm as an investor is going to go up and up and up. And sometimes it just goes crazy. And when it does go over the top, that's when you find investors being your advocate with other investors. So, big idea, deal summary, use of proceeds, how and when investors get paid. So, the big idea is not just, oh, well, I think this is really cool. It is, you have discovered there's a big problem in the world somewhere. I discovered that less than 5% of entrepreneurs worldwide resonate with investors. That creates a big idea for me to create a claim of solution. Rather than 5%, the people who have completed the programs that I've led over the last 10 years, 25% of them have gone on to raise capital. That's my claim of solution. What are we doing today? You get a peek at that solution. You don't get the whole solution, although it's embedded, but you get a good look at it. And you say, if I came to you a month from now and said, okay, there's this other program that's kind of like an advanced version of the perfect pitch workshop that you participated in, but it costs $10,000. I say, well, I have to think really long and hard about, am I going to spend $10,000 to improve the likelihood I accelerate capital? Well, just think about it. If you're raising $5 million and you accelerate that process by 2 months, what's the economic value of that? My point is, you have to move through these things. Here's the big problem that we figured out how to solve. So I'm going to pick on Dennis for a minute. So Dennis, you got to unmute your phone or unmute your mic because I'm going to ask you a question and you need to respond. So I know nothing about your business. I know nothing. So what's the big problem that you figured out how to solve? I don't want to hear about your product. I want to hear about the problem that some of your customers are experiencing that you figured out how to fix. What is it? You got 2 sentences. Two.
We give the possibility to our users and customers to book online a wine experience worldwide in a winery or with a local operator or from a wine tour operator, sorry.
Okay, so what's the problem that those customers want to solve, but they can't without your gizmo? What's the problem?
They travel, they want to find and book online a unique and authentic experience, wine experience, and they don't have a TripAdvisor of wineries. And so we built the TripAdvisor of wineries.
Okay, so does everybody get that? That's a nice, clear encapsulation. Now, why is that clear? As one of my clients is the world's largest wine broker, bulk wine broker. And so I will be going to Montpellier, France, sometime in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So I want to go to Montpellier. Where am I going to go have a good experience? Well, I can either work with my client or I can find an information resource. I'm lucky. I have a client that knows every winery in France, every winery. So I've got good counsel, but that's very odd. But I understand. So did everybody else, do you all understand what's the big problem that Dennis has figured out how to solve? Got it. So that's a nice, tight encapsulation of your big idea. But that doesn't include any kind of assessment, because I don't yet know any of the attributes of the market. But we're going to get there. Oh, is this an interesting idea for me or not? If it's not, I will go investigate investments elsewhere. And that's the best thing that can happen to you. Is
Okay.
somebody says, oh, this isn't for me, I'm gone. The worst thing that happens to us as entrepreneurs is somebody says, oh, this sounds really interesting, I just need to think about it. Bad idea. That will suck up your time and money. Either you like it or you don't. If you really like it, then learn more. Okay, so that's that. The next thing is, what's in the deal summary? Well, the deal summary is where you say, here's how much money we're raising. And the question always comes up, how come that much? Why $2 million? Why 7? Why 40? The only reason to specify this amount is to say, this is how much money it will take to get the best return for investors at this level. We've done the work to figure out, if I raise $2 million, I knew this. If I raise $1 million, I could do that. If I raise $4 million, I can do this. But every one of those different raise levels has different implications for time to market, time to value, most importantly, time to exit. Okay, so we're raising $2 million to get the best return for investors at this level. And in exchange for the $2 million, we're giving, we're exchanging 10% equity in the company, which causes my company to now be valued at $20 million. That's just an important aspect. So you need to think through what that is and whether that valuation is reasonable and appropriate. Then what is the ownership model? And these are 3 popular mechanisms. You need to do some research to figure out what each of these means. Preferred shares is the most stable and easily accessible investment vehicle globally. So, but you need to understand, when you say we're raising $2 million under terms of preferred shares, what does that mean to investors? You need to know what that means. If you're using a convertible note, they're saying, what's the interest rate? What's the market cap? And why does it vary? And how much does it vary? Why does that matter? A safe note is just a special case of convertible note bred together with preferred shares. These two things are compromises that require you as the entrepreneur to be less knowledgeable and do less work. Both of those are bad ideas in my view. So you need to be able to say, we're raising $2 million for 10% of the company under the terms of a SAFE agreement. How fast can you say that? I mean, you can say that when you're going between floors on an elevator. This is making sense. Questions, comments, protests. So that's the deal summary. Here's the use of proceeds. I've talked about that a little bit, but you want to provide, if you're raising $2 million, I want to see a percentage. And why do I care as an investor? Why do I care about this? And why do I care about the distribution? So if I see up here, use of proceeds, 10% sales, 15% marketing, and 70% R&D, I'm not interested. I want to invest in a company that's going to grow, not become. I need to see a large percentage going to sales, smaller percentage going to marketing, and sustaining revenue, sustaining expense line here at R&D. Once I've got lots of customers and I can use those customers' money to drive investment in R&D and G&A, then that's okay. But at the earliest stage, I want to see customers, and I want to see explosive adoption by customers, and I want to see customers who are advocating for other customers. And that requires investment in sales and marketing. How and when investors get paid? This is really simple. It's how is a liquidity event going to take place? Questions? So are we going to get acquired by somebody else? If so, who? Is there going to be an initial public offering? What's the market? There are new public markets emerging globally on a weekly basis. And so access to public markets is getting better and better. Not easier and easier, but certainly better and better. What do you see as a time frame for that liquidity event? Now, bear in mind, early stage investors, otherwise known as angel investors, need to find an exit relatively soon because they need to turn that money over into other investments. So unless there is some significant evidence that in the relatively near future, a liquidity event is going to happen. But what is, you need to be able to share what your expectation is and why. And then most importantly, what do you see as the expected return? And remember, you're going to have different returns for investors at different levels. So you get the first batch of investors, then the second batch, and then the third. And how soon you can get to positive cash flow and self-sustaining revenue, that's something that's going to be really important to early stage investors. Any questions about this so far? So this slide right here, how investors get paid, this is why you're having a meeting at all. If you can't answer this question in a way that is seductive and compelling, you won't get anywhere else. This is why, Valentina, somebody has a meeting with you. Same thing for Paolo. So this is key. Now, how are we doing? We're okay. Now we shift the focus, because if we go back, this is the focal point of your presentation. this is the top of the hill, a mountain. This is why you have the meeting. Now, we shift our focus in the speech from here's the investment opportunity to here's how we're going to make sure that this exit or this return happens. Now, let me be perfectly clear, or try to be perfectly clear. Not every investor wants an exit. Sometimes they just want to see a well-grounded increase in valuation, because what they want to do is they want to see more increase in valuation, not just this. Okay, so the next thing that we do then is how do you go about mitigating risk? There are three major, globally documented obstacles to success. These are documented failure risks. So the first one is people. I make bad choices about people, business goes in the tank. Value. We thought that somebody was going to really value this gizmo, Marco. So Marco says, I want to do this because I think it's important in the world. Well, that's really great, Marco. Does anybody else care? And if they care, how much do they care? Are they willing to write a check? Are they willing to write a big check? Are they willing to write many big checks? Are they willing to help you help find others who will write more checks? Bear in mind, early stage investments rely upon explosive growth. And in particular, explosive valuation growth. It turns out that most of the time, valuation growth is driven by sales growth. That is not universally true. Look at Amazon. Amazon's growth was not driven by profits and margins. It was driven by adoption. And Jeff Bezos understood the requirement for explosive adoption, and he pursued that at every cost. And it's played out very well for him and his investors. So here's the things that are at risk. So what I want to know as an investor is, tell me about the accomplishments. Oops. Yep. Tell me about the accomplishments of the leader. The strange thing is I don't care much about experience. What I do care about is accomplishments. Has the CEO, the leader of the business, demonstrated leadership competence in any domain? Maybe it was in Boy Scouts, maybe it was in the Army, maybe it was who knows what. But has the CEO demonstrated positive outcomes in a leadership capacity? Next is team. Has the team demonstrated positive outcomes, accomplishments? Again, focus on not experience, but accomplishments. So I pick on somebody, Valerio. So Valerio, what could you say, or could your company say about your accomplishments? But I don't know anything about your business. And so the accomplishments that you have made are going to be relevant to your business, one would hope. Okay, but those are the things you got to get. So the leader and the team, why should I trust the leader with my money? Why should I trust the team with my money? And then influencers. Now, many people talk about their advisors and this and that, but they do it in a random kind of way. When you put them together and say, here's the accomplishments of my leader. Here's the accomplishments of our team. Here's the accomplishment of our influencers, boards of directors, advisors, those kind of things, CPAs and bankers and all of that stuff. That's what fits into this category. What have they done? What have they accomplished that has me trust that they're going to accomplish the same thing, or they can accomplish it in this setting? The next is value risk. All right. Go to any bookstore and you'll find 250 books on this topic. The books say, here's how do you do market assessment and blah, 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 blah. What are the attributes of the market that are defined by the big idea? Now think back to the opening slide. What's your big idea? Because that big idea is what defines the attributes of your market. I can't tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody have a big idea and they define their market as something else. Happens all the time. Look at your own business. Does the marketing plan, does your marketing team stay focused on solving the problem inherent in the big idea? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If they're not connected, you're in trouble and you don't know it yet. Does the product deliver value to the people in this market as defined by the big idea? See how these pieces weave together? What this does is creates a compelling and integrated story of value for investors. And finally, if I can identify what my market is, I have a good definition for how my product solves the problem inherent in the market. How am I going to reach the people whose lives are going to be affected in this market with this product? If I have a specialty engineering product, using Facebook as my marketing platform is probably not going to be a productive go-to-market plan. Does that make sense? I'm trying to do something that's a dramatic contrast just to get the point that if you've got a consumer value proposition, using technical papers as your go-to-market is probably not a productive plan. But this go-to-market plan says, here's how we're going to drive explosive adoption by the market and the customers. If this makes sense to me as an investor, then my confidence level goes up. So if I click back, if I've got a proven leader with a proven team, with proven influencers, we understand our market, we have a product that's relevant to that, and we have a go-to-market plan. Even if you have a go-to-market plan at all, if you're building on the competence of these people to create this stuff, the likelihood that you have a good outcome is higher than if you don't. So you can see how this, to go back to Dennis's question at the very beginning, which is when you move through this progression, you're building up support for your basic idea, layer by layer by layer, in a coherent and understandable way. Is that making sense, Dennis? Great, thanks. So go-to-market plan. Well, the go-to-market plan is supported by something called practices. How are we actually going to physically do these things? What are the practices that we're going to deploy? Well, operational forecasts reveal the operational practices that are where risk is going to be mitigated. So if I have operational forecasts, that means if I'm going to spend $500,000 on leads, is that $500,000 lead spend going to turn into $5 million in sales? Or is it going to turn into $50 million in sales? Yes, Dennis, do you have a question? Was that a yes or no? No, okay. So once you have go-to-market plan, whoops, the operational forecasts show your progress on this market plan. They're integrated, they're not separate pieces. The market plan, go-to-market plan informs the operational forecast. Operational forecasts inform the financial forecasts. And it's these financial forecasts that everybody bugs you about. The reason they want a financial forecast is they don't know how to assess the other things that you provided them. So if you haven't given them a big idea and you haven't given them an exit path and you haven't given them this and you haven't given them that, this is their substitute for your already existing failure. And usually when somebody says, show me your financials, you're already dead. They just didn't tell you yet. Because it's not financials that's going to drive an investment ever. If you don't believe in the other things that we've already talked about, if these things aren't clear risk mitigations, your forecasts are going to be meaningless because they won't tie together. So after you've done the financial forecasts, the only thing that's left is that how are you protecting the intellectual property of your business? So what are things that are intellectual property? Of course, we've got patents and we've got trademarks and blah, blah, blah. And those aren't the things that kill your business. What kills your business is the loss of your customer list, or the loss of your supplier list, or the loss of your trade secrets. So how are you protecting your intellectual property? Do you have agreements with all of your employees for invention assignment, for non-disclosure, for privacy? All of those agreements need to be in place with your employees, with your contractors, with your advisors, with your board members. Do you have them? Can you say that you do? That's that. So once you've done that, then you have an opportunity to say, here's a quick review of the big idea. Here's the deal, the use of proceeds, investor payoff, and what do I want you, whoever's in your audience, what would I like you to do next? You need to know what this bottom line thing is, this next step, before you ever start a conversation with somebody. What's the next step that you want them to take? And this is an invitation. When would you like to meet next to see about what our next steps are? Next Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a phone call, an email. What do you want as the next step? And this call to action, this next step, is important for every conversation that you have with any candidate investors. So my next step is, what you're going to get. So Sebastian is going to send out a copy of this presentation to each of you. So I want to take a 2-minute break. And so anybody grab a quick cup of coffee, come back, and then we'll take another 10 minutes or 15 minutes and finish up this experience for the morning. Is that okay with everybody? So think about what kind of questions you want to ask when we come back. Randy, is that okay?
Dave, they have a break right after your session. And
Okay.
your sessions should end at 9:15, but I can give you a little bit of leeway if you need it. I can give you about an extra 10 minutes if you think you need it and everyone's okay with
So then we're just about at the end. So let's just stick with, so now is the time for questions from you all to me. As part of this presentation that I didn't want to go through because it gets kind of tedious, is there's a slide that gives you a budget, time, and word count. This is really important. So for the investment opportunity, here's how much time you spend on each of these items. So you can click through here and that will give you guidance. Now, that said, I want to make sure that you understand that what I'm giving you here is a reference design. So how many of you took music lessons as a kid? Anybody? Raise your hand. If you took music lessons as a kid, raise your hand. Yikes. Nobody. I mean,
I thought Italian and music was one.
Yeah. So, all right. So let me see. So I have to step out on a limb here. So when I took music lessons as a kid, I wanted to learn how to play the guitar. And so I'm 8 years old and I go to my first guitar teacher and they said, okay, here's how you tune this guitar. Oh God, hate tuning guitars. But the first thing that I got was a little piece of paper with these funny looking symbols on it and some letters, and it said, oh, C, D, A, B, G. And some little tails on it. It said, here's how much time you're supposed to allocate. So learn how to play this exactly like this. I don't want to do that. I want to play rock and roll. Oh man, rock and roll, it's just a fad. It's going to go away. Well, I guess maybe, but that was a long time ago. Anyway, my point is that they gave me these charts to learn so that after I outgrew the charts, I could improvise without making my parents cry. So what I'm trying to do here today is to give you a framework that you can use to innovate from. But the closer you stay to this framework, the easier it will be for people to hear what you're saying and understand it. They may like what you do, wonderful. They may not like what you do, that's just as wonderful. That means you can focus all of your energy on the people who like what you're doing. So questions, comments, protests, and Randy, whenever we finish up with questions, I will just return the time back to you. Is that okay?
And I'll be glad also to insist again on what's expected for the next session.
Yeah. So who's got questions? Yes, Dennis, unmute yourself.
Yeah, you said that business angels has a time frame that is pretty short because they want to reinvest money that are investing right now. They want to get back some money and then reinvest again.
Yes.
Which is the time frame? I know that this is a strange question, but there is a sort of benchmark, a sort of time frame they evaluate.
So in my work with hundreds of angel investors, that it's almost customary, but there actually is some statutory tax regulations that shape it, and that is 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
Okay. But they will pay premiums for reliable earlier exits. More money is better than less. Faster is better than slow.
Okay.
Does that make sense? But there
Absolutely.
is, it's
Yeah.
just that.
Okay. Second question. You talked about the ways to get back money to the investor and the kind of agreement. So the safe,
Yes.
convertible, and so on. When we talk about safe and convertible, the valuation of the company, so the equity we want to share for that valuation, is it something that it's it's delayed to a second moment, to a trigger after 1 or 2 years when we talk about safe, or not, or it's something we have to establish just when you sign a safe, for example, a safe agreement?
I'm not sure I really understood your question. Let me try and restate it to make sure I'm on the same track. So I think the question had to do with the timing of triggering events, right? And so the timing of triggering events is almost always linked to the nature of the event. So sometimes you can have events where you have a valuation shift. There is events that, given a certain amount of equity contribution by a new investor, that can include a buyout of previous investors. So for instance, but this can also be part of preferred shares. The thing that's hard to remember is that in each of those cases, you're creating an agreement, and in the absence of specific statutory constraints on the agreements, that you can do whatever you want to do as long as all the parties agree.
Okay.
Okay. So, but that flexibility can get in your way.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I can do anything, what am I going to do? If I have boundaries, that gives me some guidance within which I can do things. And so those investment vehicles have far more latitude than might appear on the surface.
Okay.
Some of those, but what boundaries do exist can sometimes be statutory, sometimes they're customary. And my personal preference is the equity.
Okay.
What did I call it? The name left my head.
Preferred
Randy?
shares, something like that.
Yeah, preferred shares. Yeah. So, but whenever it's the things that can be put into any of those agreements can be mind-boggling.
Okay.
And so the thing that I suggest is really important for you is to keep them as simple as possible.
Is it something that we should negotiate when we talk about, for example, of a term sheet?
Well,
it starts from a term sheet, or?
So think about what a term sheet is really a marketing document. It's so when you sell a house, here's the general terms and conditions of the sale of my house.
Yeah.
Term sheet is here's the general terms and conditions of the sale of equity in my business.
Okay.
Either you're comfortable with and I always suggest that you draft a term sheet before you ever speak with any investor, because that guides your conversation. Otherwise, you're facing that infinite possibilities problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Absolutely.
It's not like so a term sheet is a suggested domain of agreements.
Okay.
That's all it is.
It's just to limit the kind of solutions you can find and to take short.
It puts boundaries around the I can do anything problem.
Okay.
Okay. And
great.
And it sometimes gets more attention than it merits or should merit.
Okay.
So Randy's grinning. So, I mean, this is not new news to you or Sebastian, and probably many of the others on the call is, okay, I'm sorry. It just gave me a flashback. So I had a friend who got offered a job as CEO of a privately held company. He was very flattered, very excited, and the principals of the company offered him 500,000 shares options at a crazy price. And but he didn't understand the implications of preferred shares and multiple rounds of preferred share financing. He had a business that was doing $900,000 a year in revenue. And when I came in to advise him and to help, I started looking at the term sheets associated with each of the prior rounds of financing. And when I finally unwound the cap table, they had to have a $50 million transaction for him to have access to any of his options. So, but he didn't know that. I mean, he was really flattered. He took the job and he did a great job, but was never able to really get the business turned around. So it's but you can have those kind of provisions, and they're really scary because they can be pretty nicely hidden. So when you raise a little bit of money and you say, oh, there's another company, we ought to acquire that company, you better be an expert at understanding the cap table of that other company, not just your own.
Dave, we're gonna have to cut because they need to have a break for the next session.
Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks.
Yeah, so anybody can try and connect with me on LinkedIn, and I look
Definitely.
forward to hearing from any of you.
And so we see you next week again. We're gonna send you an email about what framework and what flow we're talking about. It would probably be for a 4-minute pitch.
Yes.
And we'll give your feedback for maybe a minute because we have only an hour and 15 minutes. But we have to. We will cut you at 4 minutes. We won't have any. We won't have any chances to do any other way. And so we will give you the format under that framework, and see you next week. And you'll have another session with Dave also after that on capital access, which is a broader program that he will cover for almost 3 hours. So thank you all for participating. Thank you, and we see you next week. And then Randy.
Yeah, I have a couple of quick announcements before I send you guys to the break.
Okay, I'm going to leave, and you guys and Randy, I hope to hear from you shortly.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, so, as you may have noticed, when we built the schedule, we ended at, I'm going to say 10:45 because I don't feel like doing the math, whatever 45 that is for you. So we had built sort of a 15-minute slush into this. So we are going to take a full 15-minute break here in a moment. 2 things that I would like for you to do if you get a chance over the break. One is do check your emails. You have the one from me regarding your mentoring times on Thursday and Friday. And so if you can send me a confirmation that you've seen them. There's a couple of people that have asked if they can change times. So you might even already have a follow-up asking me if you can switch around. Sorry. And the second thing is at some point in the next couple of days, everyone has now been shared on a Google folder, but if you can drop just a headshot of yourself into it so that we can use it to help get to know your faces before you get here. It's kind of easy to see on Zoom, but also everybody kind of looks alike on Zoom. So if we can get some good photos of you guys, it'll help us get to know you a little bit better ahead of time. With that being said, we're going to take a 15-minute break. So we will see you back here at 9, I'm going to say 38, but we'll get started at some point in that time. See you soon.
Later.